the weight of the world upon its wings, in the oneness of peace is in the dance of trees who stir before the first breath of wind is yet perceived. Trust in the song becoming one with the dance, and all mysteries can be believed. Songs of lies long past the touch our own are written in the earth ever giving, and now to maintain the harmony gives to us all lives worth living. For the oneness of everything. Still, we seek to find a truth that we might understand and reduce to terms defined. Vast and immeasurable time, space, also overwhelmingly designed. Oh, passing years, just might I know the faith that winters in the heart to be reborn in spring, to hear and to feel the pulse of life enters my soul as a song to sing of the oneness of everything.
Seems to me what the day is done, with the heartbeat of the seasons, me with the heartbeat of the spirit song. Seems to me with spirit song. Seems to me what the day is done, with the heartbeat of the seasons, me with the heartbeat of the sea.
Good morning, everyone. Ooh. Can almost hear me say that twice. We start our services by ringing a bell and calling into the space our covenant with one another. We ring this bell 3 times. The first is to renew and rebuild relationships. We invoke and invite the presence of our land's forebearers, those to whom we did wrong and with whom trust needs repair. We occupy the unceded land of the Muwekma tribe of the Ohlone people. The second calls us into relationship with ourselves and with one another, that we open ourselves to the wisdom and diverse array of customs, procedures, assumptions that are all around us, and we connect until our commitment is to be beloved to each other. And the third is to call us into relationship with our children and our children's children out to the 7th generation, reminding us that what we do now or what we fail to do will be felt by those who come after us.
Good morning. Sharon Davis, your worship associate for this morning. I don't remember being afraid of the dark when I was a kid. I actually didn't have a nightlight in my bedroom, and we didn't have one in the bathroom either. I really remember the few times that I was allowed to stay up after dark on a summer evening, when kids would run from neighboring homes to play kick the can or hide and seek out in the street in front of our suburban block. This was magical, not only because it was a surprise that I wasn't going to get into trouble for being out after dark, but because kids that I never related to during the day would all play together. There was this amazing energy in being able to rush out and kick that can that just overwhelmed all that kind of thing. So we didn't worry about whether we were really friends during the daylight. Age, gender, and religion didn't matter. I also embraced with delight our family attempts at astronomy. Not only did we go out and look for that first star at night to make that special wish, we also would bring out a map of constellations into the backyard and try to find the Big Dipper or the North Star. Driving up into the canyon near our town, we could park in a picnic area and look up and see the Milky Way, and sometimes a meteor shower. As an adult, it seems a shame that my neighborhood is full of bright streetlights and home security lights. Going out into the living room at night without turning any lights on, I find tiny LED lights winking from every power strip, computer, television, stereo. Even the dishwasher and the microwave have bright LED clocks. In our bedroom, we have dark blackout shades for the window to dim the light from our neighbor's house. But we have to remember to close the door to the bathroom to keep the light from that window from coming in. I taped over some of the twinkling blue LED lights from the power strip in the bedroom, but still the artificial light seeps in. Let us reclaim darkness. Let us embrace the velvety smoothness of the dark, the calming of nighttime, the ability to relate by sound and touch to others, discarding our preconceived prejudices of appearance. In the words of Paul Simon in his song, The Sound of Silence, "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk to you again."
Lighting the chalice is a ritual that we do each Sunday as Unitarian Universalists. It connects us to one another and to Unitarian Universalists all across the globe. Indeed, we often light chalices before our meetings and gatherings of all sorts where we get together. It is a reminder that we are kindred souls to one another. Those who love us and want the best for us are those who we gather with. And it reminds us that we share the same dream. Lighting the chalice is usually accompanied with words of inspiration or reminders of our highest ideals. We have a lovely reading that we usually do every Sunday, but this first Sunday, or at least the first Sunday that I'm in the pulpit, we have come to remind ourselves of aspirations from our covenant, the promises that we make to one another and what we aspire toward. This morning, we will be exploring our 8th aspiration of the covenant, and I invite you to recite it together with me when it comes up on the screen. We aspire to build a community which values celebration and fun. That's worth saying twice. So I'll let you say that in your mind.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good volume going on this. My name is Deanna Alm. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a member of the board. We're so glad that you've all joined us this morning. We are a group of people who come together to share in a faith that honors the individual search for meaning, acknowledges and celebrates the worth and dignity of every person, and encourages us to make the world a better place. We offer a special welcome to any of you who are new here. Thanks for coming to see who we are. We're eager to meet you. We use chat in Zoom or our book near the welcome table to share joys and concerns, personal milestones of importance, which will be read aloud in the service. We have social hour after the service where we get to visit with one another on the patio, and I did see there are donuts today if you need a little extra temptation to stay, or in breakout rooms on Zoom. The worship host will give you more information about this immediately after the service. In the meantime, we put a link to our weekly newsletter in chat so that you can see all the events coming up. We encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. And we also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc.org, and you can use that to request a newsletter or any other information you would like. There are a few things we'd like to call your attention to. Attendees should be masked inside and outside Cole Hall during the service, preferably with N95 or KN95 masks, and we have those available at the welcome table in the back. Eating and drinking should happen outside. There's more information on the bulletin board to that side and in Week on the Peak. A few other announcements. Our online black and white auction is coming up in February, and preparations are happening now. Our delightful Julie Ganslin, give us a wave, Julie. There she is. She's calling people to ask for donations. Don't worry if you feel like you don't have an idea. Julie may be able to suggest something, or you're welcome to reach out to your auction committee, which is me, Suzette, and Colleen, and we can also help you out with that. I've been told there is a possible new event coming up this weekend, but details are still being set up, so just make an extra effort to keep an eye out on your email this week. And finally, do what I always forget to do, and please silence your electronic devices. If you hear or see something in this morning's service that inspires you or makes you laugh or brings you hope, please do go ahead and tweet it, share it on social media, or just tell a friend. We'd love to start a wave of love and justice with every gathering. Thanks again for joining us.
So this is a sing-along song. For those of you that know the sound of silence, it should be easy.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence and restless
and Jessica, and our special guest, Stephen Longfield, today. This morning for the story, I wanted to share with you the background of that song. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Everybody knows that iconic line from such a memorable Simon and Garfunkel song, but there's also a story that comes with it. It begins with Art Garfunkel, who is a Jewish kid from Queens who enrolled in Columbia University. During the first week at freshman orientation, Art met fellow student from Buffalo named Sandy Greenberg. They immediately bonded over shared interests in literature and music. They became roommates and best friends, and with the idealism of youth, they promised to be there for each other forever. Soon after classes started, Sandy began noticing that he was having trouble with his eyes. His doctors diagnosed it as temporary conjunctivitis, but it continued to get worse. And finally, a specialist gave Sandy the bad news. He was experiencing severe glaucoma, which was destroying his optic nerves. The young man with such a bright future would soon be completely blind. Sandy fell into a deep depression. He gave up studying law and moved back to Buffalo. He worried greatly about being a burden to his financially struggling family, and that shame and fear led him to cut ties with all of his friends, refusing to answer their letters or phone calls. But Art's loyalty to Sandy was bigger than all of that. He flew up to Buffalo unannounced and convinced Sandy to give college another try. And he promised that he would be with Sandy right by his side to make sure that he didn't fall, literally or figuratively. Art kept his promise. He escorted Sandy around the campus and served as his eyes. It was important to Art that Sandy not create a connection between darkness and feeling alone. So Art started calling himself Darkness to demonstrate his empathy with his friend. He'd say things like, "Darkness is going to read to you now." And Art organized his life around helping Sandy. One day, Art was guiding Sandy through crowded Grand Central Station when he suddenly said that he had to go and left his friend Sandy all alone. Sandy was terrified, and he stumbled and bumped into people, and he fell, and he cut a gash in his shin, and after a couple of hellish hours, Sandy did finally get on the right subway train. After exiting the station at 116th Street, Sandy suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder, and then he heard Art's voice. It turned out that Art had followed him the whole way home. He wanted Sandy to begin to get a sense of his own independence and the determination and the courage that that would require. Sandy recognized that moment as, quote, "the spark that caused me to live a completely different life, without fear of darkness that had become his life." Sandy graduated from Columbia and went on to earn graduate degrees from Harvard and Oxford. He married his high school sweetheart and became an extremely successful entrepreneur and philanthropist. While at Oxford, Sandy got a phone call, and it was from Art. This time, Art was the one who needed help. He had formed a rock duo with his high school friend, Paul Simon, and they desperately needed $400 to record their first album. Sandy and his wife, Sue, had literally $404 in their bank account. But without hesitation, they wrote the check. The album was not, unfortunately, very successful. But one of the songs, The Sound of Silence, got remixed and became a #1 hit later that year, which propelled Simon and Garfunkel out of obscurity and into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The two Columbia graduates, Sandy and Art, are still best friends. Art Garfunkel describes his time with Sandy as, quote, "When my real life emerged, I became better in my own eyes and began to see who I was, which was somebody who had something to offer." And that seems like a story worth telling.
We take up a collection on Sundays for the simple reason that our purpose in gathering is more than ourselves. We want to make sure that the ministries that we need, the ones that infuse worth and dignity to our children, our youth, our programs of learning and leadership, our ministries of anti-oppression, and our work in the larger world, are in place to meet the needs of others. We hope you will make a contribution toward these worthy causes by mailing your check to Mission Peak UU Congregation at the address on the screen. You can also use the bill pay option on your online banking, or drop your check in the Mission Peak mail slot, or pay online with a debit or credit card. Thank you for supporting and sustaining the efforts of our friends, members, and staff. Your contributions make loving, learning, and leadership more possible.
One of the things that keeps us coming week after week is the opportunity to gather together, the knowing that we can face more trials, more struggles, more challenges, and we can make more of our celebrations by being together. If you have a joy or concern that by sharing with this caring community might bring hope or resilience or strength, we invite you, if you are with us online, to write that into the chat online, or if you are here in person, there's a book back there, you can share that. We will read those aloud so that we can all, as one community, hold one another in the week to come. If your sharing is more personal, we invite you, Reverend Barbara and myself, to contact us for a more private conversation. And if you would like to drop a stone in our stone garden with a silent prayer, we invite you, while the music plays, to come by.
Sleep, my child, and peace attend you all through the night. I who love you
These are the joys and sorrows that are alive within us this week. And finally, one last stone for all of the unspoken hurts and hopes that are still in our hearts. May we, together as a community, look out for one another, join hands with open hearts, open minds, open doors, and open arms.
Hi, so I have a reading. It's from Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper. It's called The Darkness Divine. God resides in depths of darkness, as in the lights of sunbeams. The moon shines brighter, surrounded by night, and life is secure in the black waters of the womb. As the night sky, littered with stars, demonstrates again and again, there is beauty in darkness and beauty in light. One no more brilliant than the other, one no more necessary than the other, one always complementing the other. Without the heated darkness of the universe, splitting neutrons, electrons, and protons from atoms, life and light would never be. The task for us today is to recognize God in both, to see the divine in the rich brown earth, the textured black walnut, as well as the white snow and the pale pink jellyfish, to see the sacred in the panther and the swan, to embrace the dignity of the Black Madonna as it is embodied in the Virgin Mary. The task for us today is to look into the multifaceted colors of the onyx and see the miraculous spectrum of color produced in the prism of a diamond.
I see a red door and I want it painted black. No colors anymore, I want them to turn black. I see the girls walk by dressed in their summer clothes. I have to turn my head until my darkness goes. I see a line of cars and they're all painted black, with flowers and my love both never to come back. I see people turn their heads and quickly look away, like a newborn baby, it just happens every day. I look inside myself and see my heart is black. I see my red door, I must have it painted black. Maybe then I'll fade away and not have to face the facts. It's not easy facing up when your whole world is black. No more will my green seagull turn a deeper blue. I could not foresee this thing happening to you. If I look hard enough into the setting sun, my love will laugh with me before the morning comes. I see a red door and till my darkness I wanna see your face painted black, black as night, black as coal. See the sun flying high in the sky. I wanna see it painted, 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 painted black. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. I feel like I have reached a pinnacle in my career when I can do a service with the Rolling Stones. Painted Black by the Rolling Stones and Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel are such iconic songs which define the 60s. Both were claimed by a generation simultaneously casting off what's painful, and in Painted Black, they vow to paint over the painful parts. And the other song, looking and finding the inherent good in what we usually try and avoid. Long ago, in certain cultures, there was an ancient practice carried out by the people of a given city. Some of the people of those cities gathered up their troubles to cast them out, and some who would try to find new ways of making use of them. Those who vowed to get rid of their troubles were afraid that if such things remained in their midst, their misfortunes would multiply and expand. So often, with more diligence than understanding, they collected all of their sins together, their fears, their greed, their gloom, their avarice and violence, and they put them all into a big box. And then they tied the box to an animal and sent that animal out of the bounds of the city as the sun was setting. They hoped they would never hear from that animal or that box again. Another group within the city also gathered those same things that troubled them, but they, often with more understanding than diligence, sought to figure out new ways to put such energy to use and find out how things would turn out better. These two kinds of people didn't always agree or even trust one another or approve of one another's methods, but they would often see one another lined up at the outskirts of the city, staring out to the horizon, one group worrying that the animals carrying their box of maladies would wander back into the city, and the other wondering if they might have sent something precious off into the distance that they would need later. We aspire to be a community which values celebration and fun. This is what the 8th aspiration of our covenant reminds us. But first, we must prepare ourselves, look around, clean up, pack up whatever gets in the way of that celebration and fun, anything that makes us uncomfortable, and cast it off so that it doesn't prevent the joy that we are hoping to build with one another. But have we packed up the right things and brought forth the right things? for celebration and fun to be possible. Today, I want to talk about darkness, specifically my discomfort with it, my lifelong efforts to pack it up and keep it at bay, the things also about darkness that tell me I'm not alone in my efforts, and the price that we all pay when we so vigilantly send our boxes of darkness out into the night. One quote that I want to have us consider comes from Marianne Williamson. It's in our order of service, who says, "We always fear the darkness to the extent that we ourselves are not providing the light." We always fear the darkness to the extent that we ourselves are not providing the light. I grew up in Los Angeles, land of the eternal sunshine. Sunshine all day, glitter and floodlights at night. When you live next to Hollywood, you grow up learning that nothing worthwhile ever happens without proper lighting. Which was fine by me, because whether it was inherent or carefully taught by the place where I grew up, I took my place in this world holding a special fear of dark spaces. We lived in a 1920s Spanish adobe house with very poor wiring and long hallways. My dad, who happened to be the most frugal of Depression-era babies, was in charge of all heating and lighting decisions. And although he had a warm heart, he favored cold and dark households. He refused to buy anything more than a 25-watt bulb, which meant by the time you got down the long hallway to the back bedroom where my brother and I slept, you were a prime target for the very monsters, ghosts, spiders, snakes, and killer toys that came to life and fed on a 6-year-old's frightened imagination. We didn't even have a light in the closet where our toys were, because Dad said that we didn't need to go in there after dark anyway. So naturally, that's where the bigger and more nefarious monsters lived. And forget about the garage. If you ever got sent out to get something from the garage, it meant two things. Your parents didn't love you anymore, and you should have your affairs in order. I wish I could say that I outgrew my irrational fears, but the truth is that I just learned to box them up and pretend, white knuckle my way through the unlit corridors of my life. I carefully packed up the things that made me uncomfortable and shipped them off as best I could to the darkness at the edge of my life. Fast forward to August of my 33rd year, when I ventured out of my comfortable life and crossed the border into Canada. I'd gotten an internship with First Toronto because I thought it would be a good idea to test my assumptions, try out a different culture, and expand my sense of the familiar. Initially, I felt resilient and adventurous as I pulled into town when it was sunny and 75 degrees. But 3 weeks later, on a bright sunny day, the high topped out at 38, and I knew I was in trouble. A month after that, it was getting dark at 4:30. Now, the fine people of Canada are as polite and kind as their reputation would have you believe. Nevertheless, for the first winter, I started gathering evidence that this outward friendliness was simply a ruse to lure soft Californians with a penchant for good manners and good government toward their eventual demise. From every angle, rueful Canadians would catch me staring out the window with a panic-stricken look on my face, and they would turn to me and say things like, "You know, you really have to get out there and embrace winter." And then they'd show up at church and hand me a box that contained their grandpa's circa 1951 leather skates, offering to take me to the park and teach me to skate. But invariably I'd resist. "It's dark out there," I'd say. And I'd pack those skates into that big box of darkness and send them away. Well, two things happened in Toronto that changed my view of darkness. The first was a trip to Perth, which is a very small city halfway between Toronto and Ottawa, where I stayed with a member of my intern committee and his wife at their family's home. They lived 25 miles outside of Perth on right next to a lake. And on a crystal clear evening, late at night, we drove his truck out onto the lake to look at the stars. I was so incredulous that you could actually drive a truck out onto the lake and not fall through. I hadn't even bothered to look up at the sky, but when I did, I had this jaw-dropping experience that people who are not from Hollywood know as starstruck. Something truly magical happens when you encounter a sky filled with stars, so many stars, and packed so closely together they actually look like clouds. I learned that what I was looking up at that night was actually our own galaxy. Since Earth is at the far edge of the Milky Way, we were actually staring out at our galaxy lengthwise. All at once, I felt incredibly small and at the same time also part of a huge constellation of all things in the cosmos. And after a few minutes, I realized that the light from the stars was so bright we didn't even need any other light to see one another or the contours of the lake around us. And it suddenly hit me how incredulous it was that I had made it 33 years on this planet without seeing this life-changing majesty. And yet, it had been right above me the whole time. And then I realized I had never allowed myself to intentionally walk out into the darkness that way. And I realized that I wasn't the only one. My intern committee member and his wife shared with me a story that I didn't know about. They told me that hours before the sunrise on January 17th, 1994, which was just a couple years before, a magnitude 6.7 earthquake struck Northridge in LA County, about 20 miles from where I grew up. It was an earthquake large enough to shut down the entire electrical grid of the entire LA basin. And when people experienced the earthquake, they rushed out of their homes and then they discovered a darkness like they had never known. And of course, police and emergency agencies were receiving all kinds of phone calls, but one type of call stood out to them. People all over the LA basin were reporting a gaseous cloud in the night sky. Some explosion, they surmised, must have released something into the air, and they wanted to know if it was safe to breathe. It turns out they were seeing the same Milky Way that I saw on the lake in Perth. Very few people in Los Angeles had ever seen anything like it before. And of course, they were afraid. Sometimes it's not what's around us that keeps us afraid and unable to experience wonder. Sometimes it's what's within us. Turns out more than 30% of the world lives close enough to an urban environment where the glare of the sky glow of refracted light prevents them from seeing the Milky Way with their own eyes. 30%. And if you live in the US, that percentage is close to 80%. I want to show you a short video created not very far from here that gives you an idea of what we're losing when all of that light blinds us to the majesty that's out there. level 4. It's interesting that that last one that we saw was what every single person living on earth saw just 150 years ago, every night. When I got back to Toronto, I was excited to share about the experience that I had and what I was learning about overcoming my lifelong fear of darkness. And my supervisor, Mark Morrison Reed, listened and smiled. Mark is a gentle and loving figure and a prophetic black minister. He had written Black Pioneers in a White Denomination about the few ministers of color who preceded him into the UU ministry, and he had just finished co-editing Been in the Storm So Long, which was a collection of poetry and readings from such ministers. He went on to write books about the black empowerment controversy within our denomination, and also about the UU response to Selma, Alabama, for Dr. King's call. When I told him and described my lifelong discomfort with darkness and how I was beginning to recognize what a mistake that it was holding that, he pointed out a social implication of what I had seldom considered. As I was packing all of that darkness into a box, I was also unconsciously packing a great deal of fear and negativity into the way that I was thinking about it and projecting it onto darkness. He showed me a reading from co-author of Been in the Storm So Long, Jackie James, from the book that they had just released. Here's an excerpt from that book. Black male, black list, black mark, Black Monday, Black Mood, Black Hearted, Black Plague, Black Mass, Black Market. Good guys wear white, bad guys wear black. We fear black cats and the dark continent, but it's okay to tell a white lie. Good to be pure as the driven snow. Angels and brides wear white. Devil's food cake is chocolate. Angel's food cake is white. We shape language, and we are shaped by it. In our culture, white is esteemed, it is heavenly, sun-like, pure, immaculate, innocent, and beautiful. At the same time, black is evil, wicked, gloomy, depressing, angry, sullen. Ascribing negative and positive values to black and white enhances the institutionalization of this culture's racism. Those ancient cultures that I mentioned, when they packed up their darkness into boxes and sent them out into the desert on animals, those animals were usually goats. It's where the term scapegoats comes from. There is a price that's paid for packing up and casting out the darkness, besides our inability to see the joy and the wonder that's literally all around us. There's a price that we pay beyond the fun and the celebration that we miss because we haven't learned to integrate what surrounds us. One of the signs of privilege is being the ones doing the packing and the casting out. one of the signs of marginalization is having things tied to you and being cast out. Hello, darkness, my old friend. One of the reasons that I love that song is that line and the story of Art Garfunkel and Sandy Greenberg that I shared earlier about how Art began to call himself darkness so as to help Sandy learn not to fear what was part of his condition, not to see himself as needing to be cast out of the community. But one of the most interesting things that I learned is that Art Garfunkel didn't write that song. Paul Simon wrote that song, and he wrote it before this experience with Sandy Greenberg. He wrote it in the bathroom where he would go in his house to escape the glare and the noise of his life. He would go into the bathroom and turn out the light because he said that it helped him to concentrate. And he would say, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." Poet Mary Oliver has a poem called The Uses of Sorrow. In it, she writes these lines: "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift." You know, when the electric light bulb was invented 150 years ago, a cascade of change ensued that we have never completely caught up with. We stopped allowing the dark to limit us. We began to stay up later. We began to travel at night. We became almost as active at night as in the day, and new forms of artificial light only brightened those once dark streets. We began to feel safer and less afraid. But in the 5 to 6 generations since that discovery, we've become more zealous in our desire to cast out that darkness. In the last 50 years, the light we produce to ward off the dark has increased an average of 270% per country. In the last 25 years, with the production of LEDs producing brighter and cheaper light, the U.S. continues to increase its lighting by 6 to 10% each year. The problem is we share this planet with others who don't share our fears of the darkness. 30% of vertebrates and 60% of invertebrates are nocturnal, which means their survival depends on having nearly total darkness. Sea turtles, for example, are now threatened due to their hatchlings, once they emerge from the sand, instinctively are taught to follow the moon's reflection on the water in order to get to the ocean where they can survive and live. But they are being fatally drawn off course by the hotels and the restaurants and the entertainment centers along the coast, which distract them. We too are being lured fatally off course. We were not made for all of this extra light that we have produced to avoid the darkness, from TVs and computers and phones, especially at night. Scientists are now discovering how it disturbs our circadian rhythms and our particular circadian trough, which is when we need sleep the most. Not being able to sleep during that particular time not only robs us of rest, but it increases anxiety and depression. They're discovering also that photoreceptor cells in the back of our eyes become overwhelmed, resulting in the disruption of our endocrine system's production of melatonin. Besides making us sleepy, melatonin also serves to stabilize free radicals in our body. A buildup of those free radicals becomes a precursor to many types of cancer, especially breast cancer. Thus, sources of excess light, especially LED sources, which are rich in a particular kind of blue light, are now being considered carcinogens. Friends, we are moving into a dark point of our annual cycle. We are hoping it does not correspond to a dark point in our social and evolutionary cycle. We've been hoping that discovery of electricity and the invention of the electric light bulb could mark another milestone of our enlightenment, but for that to be true, it's important that we illuminate more than what's around us. After all, light is not the source of racism, it simply reveals new dimensions of it. It is neither the source or the answer to our fears, just another way to avoid them. Perhaps what we're really learning is that it's time to recognize the light that we need and the light that we don't. Begin to travel into the dark. Gather together in communities for celebration and fun. Maybe like Sharon reminded us, and go out and play kick the can and not worry about whether we are really friends in the daylight. Age, gender, race, religion doesn't always matter. Perhaps when we learn to do that, we will learn that courage is not as artificial as our light. May it be so.
no bitterness. Where is dusting? Where grave thy victory? I triumph still if thou abide with me.
Is this microphone on? Yeah. And please join with me in reciting these words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, hand on your heart, reach out to those around you, within you, and all around the world. We always fear the darkness to the extent that we ourselves are not providing the light. Let the blessings of darkness be upon us, and let us marvel at the light shining within each person all around us. And may the constellations that form from us working together guide us in our discovery of new dimensions until there is a day we are all playing kick the can, celebrating and having fun, and knowing that we are all beloved together. Special thanks to Stephen and Jay and Jessica and Tiffany and Sharon and the boys back at the console. Go in peace.